I'm here with Dr. Meichenbaum, who needs no introduction, and we have agreed to talk to you about very interesting topic, so current and so relevant. Of course, for Dr. Meichenbaum, this is nothing new. He's been working on this for decades, and now he very graciously agreed to donate some of his notes on resilience. And there's also, but hey, let me stop right there. Why am I talking about this? Dr. Meichenbaum, you take over.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and for all your support and promotion of all our material. I'm actually offering this recording from Cape Cod in Massachusetts, which is my summer home, where my wife and I have been together for 56 years. I'm now 82 years of life and have actually lived a rather charmed life until 1 month ago. And 1 month ago, I was offering a Zoom presentation at 6 in the morning on how to help people deal with traumatic bereavement and prolonged and complicated grief. That afternoon, this was in Florida, my wife was crossing the street at a pedestrian crossing with flashing lights and so forth. And someone in a pickup truck actually hit her and killed her as she was crossing the street. So I was now living my lecture and had actually spoken about what is it that distinguishes the 20-25% of individuals who have experienced traumatic bereavement versus those who are similarly impacted but go on to evidence some kind of ability to keep going in spite of. So let me just share some of the lessons I've learned that will make the material you're about to see in the handout come alive. In a second presentation, I'll talk more about the research that we did that contributed to this handout. So my wife, when she was hit by the car, was actually lifted by a helicopter down to a trauma center, which is about an hour away in St. Petersburg. The police provided me an opportunity to drive in a cruiser down to see her. When I got to the hospital, in fact, the doctor announced that she was already died. And they asked if I would like to go in and see her. Of course, I said yes. And as I went in, I actually pulled down the sheet. I work at a head injury center, so I knew something about the nature of these kinds of accidents. And she was pretty messed up. And interestingly, one of the things that happened was I felt her hand. And since she had just momentarily beforehand died, her hand was warm. So I actually held her hand until the hand went cold. And indeed, there was a chaplain sitting next to me. I don't remember exactly how long I held her hand, but I asked the chaplain to take a picture of my hand over her hand. That picture got sent to my daughter-in-law, and she, in turn, took that picture, and permit me to share this, actually
please.
Took that picture and made it as a pillow. Now,
That's incredible.
You know, I know a lot about grief and how people cope with it. And let me take a moment or two, if I may, to just share that so that when you read the findings that I cite and the other material that I have on the Melissa Institute that I'll tell you about, there's a concept by Rondo called STUGS, which is sudden temporary upsurges of grief. And even though I'm a grieving widow, I'm still a psychologist. And I've came to keep track of what are the triggers that lead to these kinds of grief episodes. And there were two kinds of triggers that I have discovered that I think have a lot of implications if in fact you are ever trying to bolster resilience in people who have been victimized and traumatized. One kind of trigger are surprises, some kind of stimulus event, either a song, a comment by someone else, some kind of other unexpected event is a strong reminder and leads to temporary upsurges of grief. You know, it sort of runs its course, or I'm able to use a variety of coping strategies. The other kind of trigger that's interesting is I will engage in some activity, like go for a walk on the beach here in Cape Cod on a sunset, or go to our favorite restaurant, and sit in the same spot, or go for a hike where we enjoyed for all those years. And what triggers the grief there is the realization that this is an activity I'll never be able to do again with my wife. So it's interesting that you do get intrusive ideation. And sometimes that intrusive ideation has to do with when I pulled the sheet down and what she looked like. The accompanying anger and bitterness of having someone violated the pedestrian crossing and led to her death. I have 4 children and 7 grandchildren, so they're all grieving as well. It turns out that this picture of the pillow with the hands is a reflection of 56 years of love. And one of the things that becomes really interesting is that you don't try to exclude the memory of those that are deceased. As Bob Niemeyer and others who have written about this, you actually develop a new relationship. And you often tell stories about your deceased, and it's as if she is still alive in my life. There are a couple of caveats to note in this area, and 2 that I really want to highlight for you. One is Kubler-Ross and Kessler and others have suggested that people go through various stages of response, emotional response, in the aftermath of grief. And I think the data does not support that notion, even though the course is rather impressively promoted as a way of understanding. And in fact, Camille Wartman, Roxanne Silver, and others have really debunked the notion of stages of response. And in fact, people embracing stages may actually inadvertently make things worse for the individual who's grieving. There may be an expectation by the healthcare provider that the individual has to go through some period of anger or remorse or something. And when they study people who have had diverse traumatic bereavement, that there is no particular perspective. And moreover, if you're going to be effective as a therapist, you have to be really culturally, spiritually, religiously, gender sensitive in how people actually cope with grief. There's one other kind of caveat that I really, since I'm in a teaching mode, is that recently the American Psychiatric Association has added prolonged and complicated grief as a DSM category. Yeah. This means that therapists can now bill for treating people who are experiencing grief. And my concern here, and the caution that I want to highlight for you, is that there's a real need for therapists not to pathologize this human emotion, nor to intervene too early or try to fix the person. In fact, if you go to the Melissa Institute website that I oversee, you will be able to see that we've put together a checklist on how to help people cope with grief, which reflects a whole variety of other efforts. I'll conclude this with one last thing that I've learned and want to make sure you are able to do. When my wife died, she had a variety of different kinds of credit cards, bank accounts, and so forth. She really looked after the finances and supported my career so that I could actually devote myself to psychology. The one key message that I want you to take is, if you have a significant other in your life, make sure that you share your passwords to each of these accounts, okay? And that you both know where those passwords are. If you don't, you are going to be screwed, okay? And you will not believe the amount of stress. You know, I can eventually handle grief, but all the paperwork with the banks and the police and lawyers and the medical, anyway, look, please enjoy the handout. I hope you benefit from it, you know, and if you have responses, you know, you could always get in touch with me. I've also put together this Roadmap to Resilience book that I made available for free, and you're welcome to use that as well. I'm 82 and I'm in the generativity phase of life, so I'm giving everything away. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you for being so open and honest, and ending this on such an optimistic note. Yeah, thank you for your story today.
Thank you for having me.